Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brent Jensen with Edmonton Global here in Edmonton. Now, many of you have never heard of Edmonton. Maybe you've never even been to Edmonton. We largely fly under the radar for the amount of strength and opportunity that really exists here in investment. One of those greatest growth potentials in investment and research and development lies in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Truly brilliant minds are at play in this region, collaborating to generate real investment opportunities in AI. The region's reputation is attracting large corporate investment from the likes of Google, Amazon, Toyota, IBM, Mitsubishi, Volkswagen, Microsoft, and more. And for the next 45 minutes, we'll be chatting with some of the local visionaries who are leading the charge in infrastructure, research and development, community building, business implementation, and training in artificial intelligence. Now, Telus is one of the big three telecom companies here in Canada. How big are they? Since 2000, they've invested $175 billion in infrastructure. In Alberta, they're investing $16 billion largely into optic and 5G networks. To learn more about 5G networks and AI, we're joined here today by Ryan Walker from Telus. Ryan's the Director of Innovation and Strategic Partnerships here in Alberta. Good morning, Ryan, to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brent. This is fantastic.
I think first question we have for you is, are we looking at a green screen or is this real life?
This is it. This is Edmonton. Isn't this awesome?
This is Edmonton, absolutely. Well, you know, we're so pleased to have you here today and learn more about what Telus is doing in the environment to set up infrastructure to attract business here. Now, we have viewers from all over the world today joining us looking to do business in the region. What would this network of connectivity do for them and their business in the region? What advantages do you see for businesses here in the region of Edmonton?
Oh, great question, and right in the deep end, eh? You know, Telus has a rich history of technology innovation here in Edmonton. I mean, if you go back 100 years, you know, we were EdTel, AGT. We've built this province and national. I mean, we're out in the international now. We've committed up to $16 billion in the next 5 years just for the growth of what we see coming around 5G, AI, machine learning. A lot of that investment growth is going to go into our optics. So Edmonton is actually one of our first large municipalities where we did a full optic build throughout the city. So it's well positioned to take on this growth, this whole 5G explosion. And the smart city aspect of all this is really key to our vision, especially, I don't know, as you mentioned, the viewers who aren't familiar with Alberta. I mean, the agricultural, oil and gas, I mean, these are industries that are rich with innovation, rich with development, and we're here to support them. We're here, and we've been partners with them and partners with the community that's going to join us here this afternoon.
Yeah, you mentioned 5G, and you mentioned agriculture. How does 5G fit into agriculture here in the province?
Oh man, agricultural, I mean, it's $1 billion organization or industry, trillions of dollars, I'm sure. We think about what's coming in the ag space as, you know, people densify the world. You know, the space for agriculture is getting smaller. Being able to do more with less is something that's fairly keen. So we think about the autonomous side of tractors. I mean, there's an outfit called DOT that's out of Saskatchewan, who we've been working with, and we've got a partnership with Olds College here. Olds College is a small community, sort of mid-Alberta, if you're not familiar. And so one of the interesting things with DOT is this tractor. It doesn't even look like a tractor, which I find is interesting. You know, if you take something and you want to make it autonomous, it could look like the traditional side, but this one it's hard to explain. But I would encourage the viewers to go check it out. But when we start to do this augmented reality, this AI side of autonomous vehicles, having that connected network, having that infrastructure behind to support it is something that's really hard to tell us, and something that we're putting, like I said, a lot of investment time into.
Yeah, DOT is definitely a company we keep our eye on. They have a partnership with Amy. Now, if we get into AI for a second, what is Telus doing in AI research and development, and why is that important for a telecom company?
Yeah, well, you know, it first starts with the foundation. So AI is really rich with data. It wants data, it wants devices, and so as we start to explode the world with AI, we're going to have devices, sensors, cameras in the millions. Being able to connect those is something that's really part of our strategy. So that $16 billion investment is really in support of that devices. We also start talking about our smart city strategy. So as we all know, there's surveillance cameras in the world. There's all sorts of sensors out there. But being able to adopt that information quickly and faster. So if you think about real-time feedback loops, especially here in Alberta, I mean, winter's here, as we can see the fall's hitting us now. Probably tonight might be snow, who knows? Having a real-time feedback loop around snow, on the roads, being able to put sensors on those roads. And so we're really working to be able to adopt and help move that data around, being able to aggregate, especially with privacy by design is something that's really hard to us, security by design. So we really want to focus on, that's a lot of data, that's a lot of information, but we want to make sure that that's done collectively, it's done securely, and it's done in partnerships. So it's one of the big areas that we're really focusing on.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I mean, if anybody can put together a network that will connect Albertans and the rest of the world, it's definitely Telus. We're going to shift here for a moment. We're going to catch up with you in a moment. But what we've seen here with 4G and LTE is done to enable innovation in business through companies like Netflix, Airbnb, and Uber. It makes me truly excited about what 5G will do for the future. So now is the time to hear from you viewers for a moment. We have a quick survey. On your screen, you're going to see a poll pop up. And that poll is, what is the current level of AI integration to your organization? It's tough to begin AI integration many times, and it starts with the question of how, where, why. So in your organization, is it none at this point or not even on the radar? Are you planning stage and getting excited about the potential? Is your organization starting some basic AI integration? Or are you already advanced and you're all in on AI? Please take a moment on your screen to input your answers. We're going to share those with you shortly. Now, AI is a technology we often associate with chatbots and facial recognition. The typical person does not engage it with traditional sectors like engineering, but one local visionary has done just that. Here we have Mr. Nassim Bashir. He's the CEO of Williams Engineering here in Edmonton. He's also the board chair for the newly formed Innovate Edmonton. Good morning, Nassim. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
My pleasure.
I know it's a little early. We had a little bit of an early start, but the sun is up and we're here now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, Nassim, we've seen more and more traditional firms making real leaps into AI, and as a result, a lot of increased competitiveness within the industries. Has your journey been the same? What does AI look like in Williams Engineering?
Well, it started a number of years ago now. For us, it's we're certainly well into it at this current stage. We build a lot of things around our purpose as a company, and have built a new business model actually out of how we can incorporate technologies like machine learning into what it is that we do on a daily basis. And so as our model has evolved, we discovered that we needed to start to solve some big problems for us. And so we created this new tool over the last number of years, which helps to work towards our proposal process. And our proposal process, I can't quite get into the particulars of it because we're going to be commercializing this product hopefully in January is our plan. But the whole idea of being able to apply machine learning is actually advancing our business in terms of what it does for us and where it does for us to make us even more efficient and productive than we were before. So we're having a lot of fun with that as well, but it's also got lots of challenges to it as well.
Okay, so you said a couple of years back. I mean, can you take us back for a moment and tell us where your journey began on AI? How, who, when, why? What was the question that you started asking to incorporate this AI into your organization?
Yeah, I would say it started 5 years ago, but we didn't know it. We didn't actually know it until a couple of years later when we discovered that the solution to efficiency really wasn't around sort of linear change to our business, it was actually around exponential change to our business. And the combination of our purpose as a company and trying to start to look for 10x results in what it is that we're trying to do is really where the machine learning aspect got into to what it is we're doing to solve that particular business problem that we had. And so that was really about 3 years ago, and then we spent literally a couple of years trying to understand our data set as a company, because we weren't a company that was built around a data-first strategy or a legacy company that has been doing its thing for many, many years, realizing we had to transform to align with what's going on around us and to be ahead of the competition that is around us today. And so that journey really looked like 2 years of struggling with our data set to get that really nailed. You just can't take AI or machine learning in our case and dump it on what it is you're doing and actually expect results. You really need to have a data set that's worthwhile to work from. And we worked really hard with our partners over at LTML, which is a big difference for us, is we needed a partner to be able to solve these problems. We decided that we're not going to build a machine learning team and a group of scientists around us. We said we needed to partner with another firm to bring their capabilities in and then combine those two things together. And in the future, what we hope to do with LTML, who's also another great Edmonton company, is to take that to the commercialization stage. So that really fills out our business model in terms of solving a business problem that we have here, turning that into something that is actually making us stronger and more efficient than we were before, and then actually adding on to our scope of things that we do as a company in terms of now our partnership with LTML to commercialize the entity and take it and to grow it in something that is really unrelated to the engineering business. It certainly supports it, but you can see how our business model is now growing in terms of going from an engineering company that applies technology to a technology company that does engineering, which is the flip that we need to make.
That's very interesting. I'm really curious, in the implementation of AI into your organization, change is often really, really difficult normally. What did it do to your culture, or did you feel any kickback from your organization? How has it built your culture moving forward?
It was a bit of a struggle, I think, and likely is even still today, because the normal construct of people, process, and tools really still applies today. But you can't just apply a new tool like this if you don't have people who believe. And so getting over that big piece of mindset, which you need to add to that people, process, and tools, is now mindset, people, process, tools. Getting people to believe that the data is actually useful, and where you get our people working in together with the machine, with the algorithms, is really where you get that augmented intelligence, where the combination of really smart humans with really smart software are actually working together to create better results. And the combination of those two things together is really where you start to take off in terms of getting that to work properly for us. So mindset was our biggest hurdle. Besides data, getting our people to really buy in and believe what it is we're doing is important for us.
Implementation that with your
for
people.
Sure, yeah.
People's a really important aspect here in Edmonton. You're the newly appointed chair for Edmonton Innovates. Now, Edmonton's been unique in that from 2014 to 2019, we've had this surge of about 26% increase in technology-related jobs here in the city. You've been a long-time Edmontonian. How have you seen the city and the environment in terms of tech and AI change over the past few years?
Just literally over that period of time, for sure, it's changed. But you can see the explosion in the last literally 2 or 3 years. Where you take a look at what's happening in the space around us with in the various technology companies, with the addition of DeepMind here to Edmonton in the last couple of years, and all the other companies that are sort of growing out of the ecosystem. It's been really quite fantastic to see them come out, and it really has been, I think, over the last 3 years, where the visibility is quite large, and also the funding that's starting to come in too. And so those that are investing from outside of this region and inside the region and coming to Edmonton and starting to invest in these companies that are here, it's remarkable to see the progress.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for making time for us. We're going to chat more with you in a bit on our group discussion, but we're going to jump now back to our viewers for a moment. We're really, really excited about organizations like Williams Engineering and their adoption of AI. Right now on your screen, we want to know what it looks like to you. Actually, we have some poll results for you. From our first poll, we have some, let's see, top responses: planning and starting and advancing are all around 20%. 29% not at all. So 29% of you are not getting into that at all, but you're here with this webinar with us today. We hope we can provide you some insights and tools in order to help your AI journey along. Now, we're really proud about some of the foreign attraction that we're doing in the region around AI. Now, one of those large firms that's taking interest in Edmonton has been Google DeepMind. Google DeepMind opened up their first international office here a few years back. Now, with them, they've come here for a lot of the talent that's here. One of the great minds of Google DeepMind is Dr. Adam White. Now, Adam is an extremely busy individual. He splits his time between being a professor at the University of Alberta. He's fellow at the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, or AMI, and he's senior research scientist at DeepMind. Adam, thank you so much for making time for us this morning.
Thank you.
I think, first of all, I want to ask you, you're not from Alberta native. You're not a native to Alberta.
That's right.
You're from elsewhere. Why are you here, and what brought you here, and why are you staying?
Yeah, so my story is pretty similar to a lot of people. I came here for graduate studies. The University of Alberta is really strong in computer science, so when I was shopping around where to do my master's, it was pretty clear to come here to Alberta. But I didn't come here to do artificial intelligence. In fact, I hadn't heard much of it. I'd never taken a course in it. I came out here to do software systems and parallel computing. And I had to take 3 courses, and I took this course from this guy, and it turned out this guy happened to be Rich Sutton. He's the father of the field that I work in, reinforcement learning. He wrote the textbook on the topic. And I just remember being in the lab, doing the first assignment where I programmed an AI to just solve a simple maze task. And it was just amazing to me that a learning system with no previous understanding of the world could solve these complicated tasks just by interacting with the world. And so from there I was hooked, stayed here, finished my PhD, left for a while, went to Indiana University, but then came back to be part of this awesome place.
Awesome. Well, on that note, you're wearing a DeepMind hoodie.
Yep.
Like I said, DeepMind landed here a couple of years ago, their first office outside of the UK.
Yep.
Many people don't hear about Edmonton. Why Edmonton for DeepMind?
Yeah, it's really strange, but the backstory is really clear. So, DeepMind started off as this small collection of people basically shopping around this crazy idea that they were going to build a company that does AI. Like, that's what the company is. That's the backbone of the company. And, people kind of maybe thought they were a little bit crazy. That was a weird thing to talk about back then. But Rich Sutton, who I've already mentioned, he was one of their first advisors. He was with them from the beginning, helping them along, telling them what he thought. And so there was already a natural connection there. And then the other piece of this puzzle is that, historically, DeepMind has hired a lot from the University of Alberta, from our computer science program. And so a lot of the thought leaders in the company, a lot of the early people in the company were all trained here in Edmonton and went there and were part of AlphaGo and the Atari stuff and data center cooling, all that stuff. People from here were involved. So it was a pretty natural thing to put an office here to strengthen that connection and put something closer to the pipeline.
You're talking about talent here. The title of this webinar is Accessing the World's Greatest AI and ML Talent. What does talent look like here out of the University of Alberta and other institutions? What is the pipeline? What's the future of talent in your prediction?
Yes, so the pipeline here is amazing. Historically the department's been really strong in games research and AI and machine learning in general. But the really special thing here is the thing I mentioned earlier, which is reinforcement learning. This idea that decision-making systems can generate their own data by interacting with the world and improving over time. That's reinforcement learning. That's something that even big tech is just starting to wake up to. But that's something that's really special about DeepMind, this focus on reinforcement learning systems, and that's the key to artificial intelligence and the key to future applications. And that's the thing that's really special here, right? We have about 8 principal investigators at the university that specialize in reinforcement learning. So, in our research group at the university, we have about 60 to 70 graduate students specializing in reinforcement learning. And then at the undergrad level, we have all kinds of people taking courses in all aspects of machine learning and reinforcement learning. And so we just have this massive pipeline of what I would say are the best trained students in the world. There's labs all over the world, in Montreal and in Amherst and London and everywhere else. But this has, since around the mid-2000s, this has been the largest place for reinforcement learning. And I'm still going to argue that it's the absolute best place in the world to learn about reinforcement learning.
I love the pitch and I love the enthusiasm. I gotta ask you. You split your time amongst a few different organizations, like I said, wear a lot of different hats. But what really truly interests you in AI right now? What's really getting you involved?
Yeah, so I'm always really fascinated by babies and small animals, right? So when you think of what babies do, right, they go from being on their back to trying to understand how their arms work, to trying to understand how to see the world, and then they move around and explore objects, and they figure out things like if you put something under a pillow, it doesn't disappear, it stays there. There's persistence of objects and things. I'm really interested in the aspects of intelligence that underlie those things. Like, what are the algorithms and the representations at play in the human mind that allow that kind of developmental pathway that happens every time, like almost independent of the situation, right? And so I'm really interested in building learning systems that kind of explore that developmental pathway, learn about just the common sense things. Like, if I were to push over that chair, it would make a thud on the ground. If I were to just get up in the middle of this interview, I could probably predict how people might react in the room. And so it's these little, simple, common sense facts about the world that our AI systems need to learn. And that's really the focus of my research now, which is, building models of the world and figuring out how to represent data.
Okay. I think I have one more question for you here. Edmonton's been strong in AI and ML for decades now, as you alluded to. What's the future for Edmonton?
It's just going to get bigger. My big interest is training, and of course also what we're doing at DeepMind. In the training aspect, we're continuing to hire, we're continuing to build out a larger, stronger team. Amy is going to be a big part of of integration with the business community and also in the educational space too. And DeepMind, our local office, we're going to keep growing, and we think that we're going to solve AI, and it's going to happen in Edmonton, Alberta.
Well, it's fantastic news. Thank you so much for your comments this morning. We're going to get back to you in a moment with our group discussion.
Great.
Now is the time for you, our viewers, to tune in on live stream and take part of our next poll. So our next poll up on the screen is, where do you think the greatest potential lies for AI integration? Is it in health and life sciences, in energy, agriculture, manufacturing, or is it just in killer robots? I want you to take a moment to answer, and we're going to share those results with you shortly. As mentioned, Adam is a fellow at the Alberta Machine Institute of Intelligence. That's a mouthful. Or AMI. The Institute is part of a $125 million pan-Canadian strategy on AI and houses some of the finest minds in the world on AI research and development. The managing director of applied sciences at AMI is Anna Koo, and she's our next guest. She and Amy work to bridge the gap between world-leading research and industry. They ask big questions, they derive unique solutions, and they develop talent and coach businesses for greater AI adoption. Anna, so happy to have you this morning here with us. I think I'm going to pause for a moment, and we have our poll results, or do we have our poll results? It looks like health and life sciences is where the greatest potential lies in AI. Do you agree with that? Or maybe I would ask you the same question. Where do you think our greatest potential is in the future?
Well, I was actually prepared to agree almost no matter which option. Almost. Because it's really not about this specific industry it's going to transform. It is going to transform absolutely everything. The tools and techniques we have developed, we are seeing great success in health and life sciences, and a lot of focus in that area, even in the Edmonton region in particular. But it's really cross-cutting. It's not about what industry you're from, it's about the kinds of problems you're facing in a broad sense. And there's technologies that you can take from, started out with precision medicine and translates directly into crop management and translates directly into HR questions. There's really this fluidity in the application that's very exciting to see.
So, Amy, you're part of AMI. Now, they're part of the Pan-Canadian strategy, like I mentioned. So there's 3 institutions. Why is AMI unique?
What's really special about AMI is our roots go deep and strong on the research side. We were initially formed as a Center for Research Excellence way back in the early 2000s, as Adam alluded to, because of our strength in research in AI and games. And the team that put that together has really focused on keeping that spirit of collegiality and collaboration intact. And so that means, even though back in those days no one knew that AI was going to be the next big thing, well, we knew. The world at large didn't know. But we had that early investment and that early commitment to keeping the collaboration and the quality of the research strong. So through the decades since then, we've grown, but we've kept that spirit. And at the time when AI really took off and industry was making their moves on professors, a lot of universities lost their staff. And so that really disrupted the training cycle and meant some centers had to rebuild from scratch. Some university departments had to rebuild their ML program. We retained our people, and not only retained, but grew. So we have those original 5 founding fellows and more. Now we're up to 23, working still in that spirit of collaboration.
It's a lot of expertise in one center. For our international viewers, how might an organization leverage some of the strengths, expertise at an institution like AMI?
That's been the question since the early days, is we have this phenomenal research that outside of the academic community is relatively unknown, and there's so much potential that's been untapped. So this is when, through the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, we developed the AMI not-for-profit and developed the industry outreach arm. And so that's been a really exciting journey, identifying what needs companies have and how to really meet people where they're at. The poll earlier was interesting because it matches what we've seen, is that really almost everybody knows they need to care about it but don't know where to start, or are just really dipping their toe in the water. And it's so crucial that you have understanding of the problem. Not just, oh, this is the latest and greatest technology that's going to be applied, but what does it mean to your organization? What kind of ethical issues are going to arise? What kind of training is important? And what kind of management decisions need to be made? And so we have 4 fronts of interacting with companies. On the kind of first entry point is training and recruitment. So we help you set up your team. ML talent is in short supply and really hard to identify, especially if you're starting your team. Who do you have to interview to know what kind of skills you need? So we provide support services for that, identifying first hires, setting you up with an intern, helping you grow your team. And then we have the business advisement services. So this is where we pair our scientists with your team to help you really explore the entire journey of designing a machine learning solution, from always starting with your business problem. What are your pain points? It's classic business, really. The difference is the technologies we're going to use, but it always starts with identifying what area you care about, refining that into a valid machine learning question, and then turning around a successful project. Then, of course, like I said, talent is in short supply, so we have our education programs. There's the phenomenal research education that goes on in the university, and then we have our 2 streams of education through the AMY Institute. One for technical people, the machine learning technician problem, and this program to address the machine learning technician shortage. That is for people with a kind of science background, but they want to understand what machine learning is and hit the ground running. So it's very applied, focused, fast training. And then the management and executive stream. So again, as I alluded to, it's so important that you have people in the organization understand the technology and the implications. So we developed a training program specifically around that.
So you're not only the expertise, but you're the coaches and mentors for implementation.
Yeah.
And when we talk about mentors and coaching for implementation, are we talking small business? Are we talking medium size? What types of businesses do you work with?
It's really not the size of the business that's the issue. It's the size of the problem and the team you're bringing to it. So we work with companies, everything from startups locally from the Edmonton region, like Okaki and Drug Bank in the health sense, to major international corporations like Roche, who sponsored the International Data Coalition for addressing COVID. And then there's Mitsubishi, and Alves Agritech is an interesting one we've recently partnered with out of Brazil, working on really pushing the boundaries of machine learning applied to agriculture.
That's interesting. Alves Agritech, I think, is actually on the webinar today, so
Excellent.
Great shout out. I want to ask you the same question that I asked Adam. What's really interesting you right now in AI and ML?
As Admin mentioned, the kind of question of how babies learn has always fascinated me, but I want to go a step lower, and protozoa, all the way down to single cellular organisms. We can do phenomenal things with machines. Master chess players, prove math theorems, do optimization of all kinds of things. We don't actually understand how biological intelligence adapts so well to so many different environments. The key thing that biology gives us is this flexibility. You can put us in a different situation, and we kind of know what to do. We make mistakes, but we learn fast. And replicating that in machines is still a wide open question in AI.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anna. We're going to hear more about you in the roundtable discussion as well. So, to all our guests so far, I mean, we have such a wealth of experience and knowledge. I wish we could fill 45 minutes just with each of our panelists. So maybe we'll start this discussion with where we started the entire panel. Around that intersection of 5G and AI. Maybe we'll start with you, Ryan. What is the intersection of AI and 5G? Who's pushing who? What comes first, the chicken or the egg?
You know what, I think it's a symbolic relationship between the two. We can't have one without the other. As I mentioned before, right, having millions of sensors, millions of devices, and AI is really hungry for that data. It needs some way to move around. Like we're getting away from a point-to-point system. I got a sensor and a computer. And as I was talking before, a little bit of one of our partnerships is ACAMP. So ACAMP is an agency here in Alberta that works up in the airport. I mean, they work lots of places, but one of the cool things that they're working on is an autonomous robot driving around the airport, and it's got tons of sensors on it. So one of the things that 5G and in our world is helping them with is how do we offload some of those servicing power from that vehicle? As is, the vehicle is very it's sexy, it's awesome, it's providing a lot of features. It's got cameras, it's got object detection systems, augmented reality systems on it, but it's all locally processed, so the vehicle is fairly large. To commercialize that, it's going to be challenging. We have to be able to offset some of that equipment. Not necessarily just, the purpose isn't just take the processing power and put it somewhere else. It's reusing it once it's somewhere else. We start to get into this multi-tenant ecosystems. We start talking about edge computing. So 5G really sets the stage for that. But to your question, we can't have one without the other. If we just built 5G and there was no reason for it, well, what's the investment? What are we doing? Same thing, you can't just put sensors out there and put products out there and expect them to work and talk. So like I said, it is a symbolic relationship.
I think I'd ask everybody else, is he right?
Yeah, and I think we've all experienced the pain these days, the importance of having strong connectivity. A lot of us are working from home and working over networks, and we all feel it when those go down. But at the same time, the potential when you do have a wide coverage network for reducing site visits, that's actually one of the major sources of greenhouse gas, is the fact that you have to travel far to go see what's going on in your plant or your remote facility. And so things like a broad network and the kind of intelligence behind the processing can help alleviate that. And that's technology well within our grasp. It doesn't even require the most cutting edge research. It just requires this marriage, as you said, between the technology, the hardware, the network, and the systems.
It's interesting how COVID sort of tested this overnight
Whew.
for us, right?
Yeah.
As Telus, we have technicians, as you mentioned, that go out and install, set up equipment at houses and businesses. And not being able to do that really challenges us. And we had to be very creative, very innovative overnight as how do we allow the customer to do it on their behalf? How do we still have digital communication capabilities? And AI and machine learning is really playing into that. Can we provide them aiding technology like augmented reality? Like here's a laptop or an iPad showing you, and we can actually point, one of our technicians could be in Toronto for that matter, and they're setting up a service here in Edmonton. And being able to seamlessly connect that is something that's really important.
I'm really excited by this conversation because in terms of our space, which is the vertical infrastructure space, the connection of buildings to cities is and the broader city landscape, and the combination of those two, the technology, the convergence of those technologies really ends up letting us design smarter cities than we ever have before. And you can think of all the friction that we have in the various processes that we have, whether it's connecting with transit or connecting to go for a coffee. And especially in that COVID environment, you want to know who's maybe around you, but the ability to be able to connect all those city systems, building systems, everything together at the same time really allows us to be able to reduce the friction of living in a city and reducing its overall footprint from a CO2 perspective and otherwise. It's so much more efficient if you actually had the data to understand what was going on around you, to know that now is the best time to get on the train because actually there's a seat on the train or whatever that happens to look like.
Yeah, and the iteration is so important. This is one reason Amy really stresses the education angle, because it's not going to be a set it and forget it kind of system. There's a temptation to talk about AI as if I'm going to buy the AI or have my smart car and then we're one and done. Yeah. But it's always iterative. Even as I alluded to in my research area, the world changes. So things like if you're averaging over all the traffic patterns from before the global pandemic, you're actually feeding a lot of misinformation into your current model. So you have to look at that and be able to adapt when things change.
That's interesting because that whole concept, and I'm certainly not an expert, I'd be curious from your perspective, the bias that could be entered into studies. And that's probably a 45-minute topic on its own, but I'd just be curious as to how do you...
I'll point it at for that one.
Yeah, well, we have some materials on this. Yeah. No, there's no question. Data is biased. Data is generated by human systems. You are generating the data in a distribution that matches it. So when you train an algorithm, the machine knows nothing. It certainly doesn't understand ethics. It doesn't even understand what a chair is or what sound it will make when it falls. So when you take the data that humans have generated and feed it into this system, it finds the answer according to the data you fed it. And it's been really interesting to see the pivot from this idea that, oh, well, it learned that from the data, it must be true, to, oh, look at what learning from the data has showed us about our current system. What can we do with that information, and how can we really address issues that arose because of that discovery process? So again, with the iteration, you kind of uncover these patterns that are either things you do want to replicate or you really don't, and then you adjust your system.
We operate today, it's just talking about this model, which is going to be so much more sophisticated than we currently have. But in terms of how we measure the performance of buildings or systems or cities today, we'd actually literally have somebody standing on a street corner counting people, which is not exactly a very effective way of doing it because it's just a moment in time that you're measuring it, and really isn't much different than that. But as you start to scale up the technology so that you actually are measuring the performance over a period of time of how people move around cities, how systems work actually with each other, there's so much more to learn in terms of how sort of ebb and flow of people or other things around it. Yeah. We're going to be substantially better off in terms of how we consume all of the limited resources that we have, whether it be energy, people's time. Things will just end up being so much better for us, I think, as we put those things together. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as we're working in our smart cities, I'm very involved with our smart city strategy on the tactical and technical layer. And you mentioned one of the areas that we're after is traffic and traffic control, pedestrian control. And it's interesting to me how, it's probably the bad way to say it, but how dumb the technology is today.
Yeah.
Like if you just think of a general intersection. So one of the very low-hanging fruit that we're trying to go after is if you put sensors on intersections, being able to predict, for example, if someone has health issues and they're crossing an intersection, when you press that crosswalk button, you got a timer, you got 30 seconds. In today's technology, to your point, the system doesn't know what's going on. It's just 30 seconds. You get going. Like, you got to get going across that intersection. It's turning. Whereas, why can't we adopt the technology using AI to predict, hey, this individual person, whatever it might be, is having maybe need a little bit longer time. Maybe there's pedestrians in the intersection that shouldn't be. Maybe there's an intoxicated person. Perhaps there's a mental health issue. Someone's homeless, sleeping underneath a shelter here in Edmonton, like I mentioned before, can get to minus 30. Can we predict these things? Can we use that technology in the good side of it? But it's a learning aspect. And as I mentioned before, that we need lots and lots of data to be able to analyze that. If it's one intersection and one person, that could take 14 years of learning just based off one intersection. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of intersections, that becomes a very fast, it then becomes a sharing concept.
And we really need to, to change the minds and attitudes towards some of these things, right? So I've been involved in machine learning for a really long time. I remember meetings we had 15 years ago where we brought in health experts and we brought in other people, and we talked to them. We said, well, what if we could build you a system that would, give you the key predictors of a disease? And they said, well, I wouldn't use it because I'm the expert. And so you guys represent the bleeding edge of change, right? That's how things are changing, and as long as you guys are pushing that change forward, it's going to change the world because the technologies are moving forward and they are ready for deployment.
And we're really seeing a shift in that there is a partnership, like Williams Engineering was talking about. The idea that we can have these systems that just take in the data and spit out answers is so wrong. It's the wrong way to approach it. So we're seeing more willingness to embrace it. And again, one of the things Amy really focuses on is this partnership aspect, because we can look at your data and find amazing facts, like the lights are on when that power switch is flipped. Woo! But working with you, we can find out that in fact, what's really important is that the lights are on when there's people in the building, and it can shut off with this profile and with this kind of safety measures around it, and find out exactly what kind of problems are actually useful to solve and solve them in the right way. But without that iteration, we get badly design systems.
A fairly interesting and very important part of that is there's a lot of data now. There's a lot of partnerships. There's a lot of sharing, and there's a lot of concern around, well, I can't give you my health data. What are you going to do with that? What machine is going to come up with the answer? So that's another thing that's really important to tell us, and I think it's important to everybody, is doing this securely, doing this with privacy at the forefront of it. If we can't do that with security and privacy at the front, don't do it. Anonymizing the data is something that's very important. Running different algorithms that are only anonymized data sets, right? So that's a huge portion of this growth, is let's make sure that's done properly first. Because if we run right into just analyzing data, it will be stopped in its tracks, because the first time that information is shared, it's sensitive, whatever it might be, we're done. So that's very important.
And I would strongly advocate, trust in the professionals and academics in this, right? Like, I've often heard the phrase, like, the people that are experts in data privacy and understanding what data means actually do work on data and work at the university. And so there's partners there to be made who have spent their entire career worrying about exactly this issue, how you can make data anonymous, what can be extracted from it. And so we need to look to our academic partners too to move that forward.
And
go ahead. I was going to say the confidence that you're all talking about, I think, is so important, because people that are going to want to, our citizens of our country, cities and provinces, need to feel comfortable with what it is we're doing, because the golden prize at the end of the day is going to be that we can actually operate our society with less money, and go figure we have less money today. So we really need to get there. It's going to take a substantial amount of investment and time to get to that particular point, but there's no point in investing that money if people don't have trust in what we're doing. Right.
And it's so important that it be the end-to-end process, from when you start collecting the data, choosing what data you collect and how you privatize it, to what kinds of algorithms you throw at it, to what impact does this have on our city's policies, what does this do to the population, how is it perceived. So it really requires partnership across the entirety of our society to find the right solutions.
And that's why I love Edmonton, because Edmonton here has an open data platform. The city of council here, they're very much like the client engagement at the forefront of these is the paramount piece, right? Again, part of that whole, why are we doing it? Why are we involved?
So This is an extremely stimulating conversation. You guys just ran with it. We do have some questions coming in from the chat. A question from Jose, who works with the drone startup in Brazil, asks, they're using sensors integrated to drones to collect data for use with AI services to obtain more reliability, low cost, and better results. What's the best way to collaborate with Edmonton to help develop their services?
Jose,
Where would they start?
Well, I mean, in that case, you've already started. But the reaching out to Amy is a really good way to get into the ecosystem. We love hearing about our great partners and helping identify who you need to work with, whether it's like you have a partner like AltaML that will actually help with the productizing, or whether you have a team that's building a tool like Alva's Agritech does and needs kind of the expert guidance and de-risking of the project. So the question of using images for better agriculture is really a hot topic right now. I've seen a lot of companies. The cutting edge is going to happen with the best combination of marrying the data to the team to the technologies. So yeah, talk to Amy and we'll get you started.
Another place to stop too is at ACAMP at the airport,
Yes.
and Edmonton International Airport, because they're already doing a lot of work with drones, and there's a couple of companies out there that are in that space that are doing everything from looking at pavement friction for aircraft landings to making sure there aren't any birds around when planes are taking off, and landing, which is really important too. So between those folks, I think there's a lot of sort of contact to that, and we're one of the best centers, I think, in Canada in terms of being able to test those ideas around drones, because we already work with Transport Canada to make sure that we have the right kind of operating environment, regulated operating environment, that we can do those kinds of things in.
It's such a combination, like having a company like ACAMP, organization like ACAMP working on the manufacturing side and identifying cutting edge techniques there, as well as the software expertise and the network. It all comes together, and it's really important to have that kind of ecosystem, because no project succeeds totally on its own.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, drones is a hot topic, right? And yeah, I mean, I would encourage the same thing. Reach out to yourselves, to Edmonton Global, to ACAMP, Telus. I mean, we're all in this space and we're all collaborating. Like, we work very closely with Amy, ACAMP, and we all have our verticals, right? We're talking about how do we have a drone in the air that's securely communicating? You know, the consumer drones today, Wi-Fi enabled, works great. They can kind of point to point. But when we get into the proliferation of drones and having them autonomously fly, now we're into secure communications. We're making sure that data set is reliable. But anyway, to question, I mean, drones is a hot topic. It's awesome. Reach out to Amy, Talent, all of us, I'm sure.
We have another question from the floor. This is from Carlos, and this question is around oil and gas. I mean, Alberta historically has been known for our rich resources. What is the environment doing, or Amy doing, in terms of optimization for oil and gas and making that industry more productive?
We most recently announced the REMI program, which is reducing emissions through machine intelligence. And so that's taking a cohort of companies to start with in the oil and gas sector, in the energy sector, going through some of our programs, our training, and our business advisement and scientific advisement services, specifically around identifying a project that's meaningful to your company, that will help with greenhouse gas emissions, and seeing that to execution, to building your first prototype. And of course, yes, we're in Alberta, so we work with companies big and small, like Willow Glen, which is a local shop who's done really exciting things on the SCADA side, to Shell, Imperial Oil, international, multinational companies, because it's across the board. The need is everywhere.
Yeah, and there's so many problems that, you know, just everyone wins.
Yeah.
So a simple problem is like leak detection in pipelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's pipelines everywhere, and they have sensors, but those sensors could be giving false readings, and so now you have to send a team out to the middle of the forest somewhere to find a pipe to see if it's leaking. That's a decision-making problem. That's a prediction problem. And, you know, I was talking to companies 15 years ago that were interested in that, and my neighbor actually works in leak detection like this. Just there's problems like this all over the space. It's the environmental angle, the economic angle. It's really great.
And that's again where the network is so important, because you need these remote sensors.
That's right.
You need a reliable communication. We cannot send the entire data set over to our massive cloud computing resources to be processed. So it's important to have the network in place. It's important to be building the right solutions and then to have them deployed.
Our time is winding down, but we do have one last question for everyone, and that is, what's the last thought you'd want our audience to know about AI talent in the Edmonton metropolitan region?
I'll go first on that one.
Yeah.
Come hire our students. And it seems like a trope, but I've been in the Edmonton education space for a long time. I did my graduate studies here. The group was large and excellent then. It's absolutely stunning now. Like I said, we have around 70 graduate students in machine learning. Ann and I went to school here. The group was really strong then. It's no underestimate to say that these people are way better. They're smarter, they're more talented, they're harder working than either of us. It's just amazing. And they're there to join startups, to build machine learning teams. So come here and build your companies around them, because they're a hot commodity. They're going to Google, they're going to Amazon, they're going everywhere else. Come get them, they're here, they're waiting.
They're so excited about the possibilities too, and there's such a rich variety of people really excited about pushing fundamental research forward, really excited about seeing the real world impact. And so the breadth of talent we have and the breadth of interests are just amazing.
Yeah, every month I have a conversation with one of my students about, I want to work on problems that matter, I want to help the world, I want to do something applied. They're not just here to prove theorems and do esoteric research. They want to change the world.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time this morning. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to the Trade Commissioner Services in the Canada offices around the world who have helped to shape and advertise this event. A recorded version of this webinar will be shared with you shortly. And as mentioned, we'll be following up with any questions we weren't able to get through in this session. I ask you to follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at edmontonglobal.ca for more information about the region, about announcements on future webinars, under the events section of our website. Now, for more information on AI in the region, also take note to visit us on October 22nd at World Summit AI, as I and Edmonton Global take over the Canada booth at worldsummit.ai. Lastly, stick around here for 2 short videos on regional talent and AI and tech in the Edmonton region. And everybody have a happy Tuesday. Be kind, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else. Thank you.